Hi, everyone. I'm Bei Fong, President of Radio Free Asia, and it's my great privilege to welcome you to today's event entitled Burma, Journalism's Power and Peril. With this event, we commemorate RFA's 25th anniversary when our first Mandarin shortwave radio broadcast broke through the airwaves to audiences in China 25 years ago today. Since then, we've witnessed sweeping changes in history and technology, recasting how we connect, how we see each other, and how we share information. But we've also witnessed fragmentation, the sophisticated spread of disinformation, and a decline in media freedom around the world, as authoritarian regimes and other malign actors have, like us, adapted and changed. This is especially true where RFA works, making our incisive brand of journalism ever more important for the millions living in those places. We bring accountability, we bring answers, we empower our audiences. Before we begin today's event, I want to thank the USAGM, our supporters on the Hill, like-minded organizations, our peers in journalism, and of course our own brave reporters and staff, as well as everyone who counts on us. I also want to thank our corporate board of directors who generously support us and our work. We count on you. You make everything possible. Since our first broadcast on this day in 1996, RFA has branched out, bringing audiences in China, North Korea, and Southeast Asia uncensored local news in Tibetan, Burmese, Korean, Uyghur, Vietnamese, Lao, and Cantonese, in addition to Mandarin. Along the way, we've developed online brands Benar News, which serves populations in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines, and Why Not, Why Now, which connects with the younger Chinese-speaking global diaspora. Today, we take a look at Burma, a country reeling from a military coup and deadly waves of COVID-19 amid an enforced media shutdown. We're very pleased to have former U.S. Ambassador to Myanmar and current president of NDI, Derek Mitchell, join us. Derek will moderate a panel on media freedom's future in Burma, followed by a conversation between myself and pioneering exiled Burmese journalist Nathan Maung. Finally, we'll close with statements from two members of Congress. Now, I'd like to welcome our moderator, who is the U.S. Ambassador to Burma from 2012 to 2016, a critical time for the country as the world and the Burmese people witnessed the great promise of democratic reform, civil society, and an open market economy. Today, Derek is the president of NDI, which works to support and strengthen democratic institutions worldwide through citizen participation, openness, and accountability in government. And of course, he's been a very good friend of mine personally and of RFA's. So welcome, Derek, and thank you again for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much, Bei, and congratulations on RFA's 25th anniversary. It's really a tremendous occasion and event. RFA has just done amazing work over the past 2.5 decades. And I'm very honored you've invited me to take part in this celebration, to spotlight an issue in a country that's very close to my heart, as many people know, free media in Myanmar, otherwise known as Burma. I should note, as some here might know, that both Myanmar and free media are a family affair. If people wonder how I got this gig, yes, I was ambassador to Myanmar, but I'm also the spouse of Min Mitchell, who is the executive editor of RFA. She could just as easily be doing this event as I, but I thought I would say that up front. I also do want to thank Rohit Mahajan, Bei, of course, and the whole RFA team for inviting me to take part today in this very important session. Despite the best efforts of the military, Myanmar has had a rich tradition of free media, particularly print media. For the 15 or so years after independence in 1948, Burma, as it was known then, was one of the freest media environments in Asia, with a highly educated, highly literate population. Like everything else, of course, though, the military has steadily decimated free press and free expression, particularly following the coup in 1962. And at that time, they drove out many of the media's best and brightest. Nonetheless, a vibrant offshore media in exile arose to take its place. After 2011, during the time that I was working the issue, there was an opening and many crossed borders back to Myanmar, if warily, after political, civic, and media space opened inside the country again. Outlets like the Irrawaddy, many of you who are watching will know these outlets, the Irrawaddy, Mizima, Democratic Voice of Burma, or DVB, and of course RFA, they all set up shop inside the country for the first time. But more recently, and more recently, I should say, print and online journals like Myanmar Now and Frontier Myanmar also distinguished themselves. And let me just take a moment to say we should keep Danny Fenster, Frontier's former managing editor, in our thoughts as he remains imprisoned without charge, now for more than 100 days in Myanmar just for doing his job. But in the aftermath of another terrible coup, of course, in February, media space is again extremely constrained and getting worse by the day. And that's simply because free speech, truth, is the enemy of feeble dictators. Autocrats love lies, they love darkness, they love fog, and they fear the light. RFA remains one of those that has been at the forefront of shining that light. And we all should thank them for their outstanding work, continuing work inside the country. Also DVB, and they, like journalists everywhere, are supported by great organizations like PEN International. So we are very fortunate to have representatives from each of these organizations join us today to talk about media conditions in Myanmar. First, Aye Aye Mon. She has been RFA's Naypyidaw Bureau Chief since 2019. Previously, she worked with DVB for nearly 2 decades, where she held numerous positions, including reporter, TV anchor, and editor. In February, Aye Aye Mon became well known for confronting the military at their first press conference following the coup, questioning the legality of their seizure of power while demanding answers on the military's use of force against demonstrators and the detention of elected civilian leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi. So that was quite a remarkable and brave move by Aye Aye Mon, but in the best traditions of journalism around the world. Chan Naing, we also have, he is the co-founder, the chief editor, and the executive director of the Democratic Voice of Burma, DVB. Originally establishing DVB in Oslo, Norway, Chan Naing helped pioneer Myanmar's exile media environment. While DVB has been banned on local airwaves since the military coup, it continues to operate online, relying on civilian reporters, freelancers, and stringers. This year, Chan Naing won an International Press Freedom Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. And finally, we have Karin Karlekar, who currently serves as the director of PEN America's Free Expression at Risk program, which, as suggested, means she works with individuals at risk as a result of their expression. Karin and her program are in an ongoing partnership with PEN Myanmar. She has almost 2 decades of experience in global free speech, press freedom, and advocacy and assistance work on behalf of writers, bloggers, and journalists everywhere worldwide. So we cannot have a better group than these 3 to talk about the issue of free speech and free media in Myanmar. So I welcome everybody. And I would like to maybe start with our 2 Myanmar journalists to give us just and maybe start with Aye Aye Mon and then Chan Naing, but just giving us your personal experience, telling us, your observations of how the media environment in Myanmar has evolved over the last decade or so in particular, but maybe over the course of your work in this space, and how have media such as DVB and RFA played a role in that evolution. So maybe Aye Aye Mon, over to you first.
Yes, we have seen media development in the last 9 years, from 2012 to January 2021, just before the military coup. We had a first democratic transition in 2010 by the President Thein Sein government. 2 years later, his government canceled media censorship they used for several decades to control press freedom and all private media. And the parliament approved a new media law. His government also allowed publication license for new 52 new journals and newspapers. And his government also allowed exile media like RFA, DVB, Mizima, Ayawari, and other foreign media to come back and to work their journalistic job. So RFA opened a small office in Yangon and hired a lot of young new journalists to work and serve for our people, our audience. At that time, many journalists used to say that those 2012-13 period was a golden age for media development in Myanmar, Burma, because journalists could write about the country's brand new democratic transition, about military-civilian relationship, about peace process and other economic and social issues openly. So media got a lot of attention from the audience, and they win many advertisements from business companies. That's why journalists say that that was a golden age for media development in Myanmar. In 2015 and after 2015, and the government also trying to continue to get a better situation of press freedom and journalist situation. The parliament trying to amend broadcast media law and right to information law, even though they couldn't finish with final decision. And at that time, and almost all media, including RFA and DVB, had a roundtable discussion, political debates. I had also one called Politics Today based in Naypyidaw. I invited members of parliament from different parties, and we discussed about different issues, including political issues. We could criticize and pointed out the weak point of the governments and the army, even though they didn't like. At least we could criticize and pointed out their weak points for the people. I think even though we didn't have fully press freedom in those 9 years, we have clearly seen media development, press freedom and journalist situation become developed together with the country democratic transition. And both RFA and DBB played in main roles in that evolution very well. Exactly, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Chan Naing, your perspective?
Yeah, I think Aye Aye Mon touched cover quite a lot, and I totally agree with her. And before I start, I want to congratulate Radio Free Asia, RFA, for their 25th anniversary, and you have done a great job. And lots of people who are working for RFA for the Burmese service, they're all my colleagues and friends, and been, at some point working together. So really, from my heart, like, big congratulations to all of you. Regarding the media changes like the taking place in the last decade, I want to bring back, like, when we started DVB in 1992 in Oslo, we need information from people inside the country, right? But if we pick up the phone and if we call people on the ground, and then we're calling from Democratic Voice of Burma, they hung up. People didn't dare to speak out. It's a reality, because it's put them in danger already just by talking to us like 5,000 miles away from Yangon to Oslo. But that situation gradually changed, slowly. And then, of course, in 2010, 11, 12, the Thein government started to reform. And we moved back. And I mean, every journalist wants to be on the ground. I mean, where the informations are, what's happening on the ground. We don't want to be living in exile and reporting back about our own country, pasting like secondhand source or that source of information. We all want to be working from the ground and where the news are happening. And we got a promise, in fact, under the Thein government, that we can operate freely without any kind of censorship, but of course orally. So we started opening up the office in Yangon in the mid of the beginning of 2012. And at the time, I have to emphasize, until February 2012, we have 17 journalists from DVB who have been in prison, who were in prison, and they were all released end of February 2012, and they have been arrested from 2007 until 2012, and the total became like 17 journalists. But the change that happened was so quick, and they were all released in February 2012. And then they were all reporting for Naypyidaw in Parliament in the middle of 2012. And so suddenly we are underground. And then in a few months, we became official recognized journalists. I think the biggest changes is, of course, it's growing gradually, but the people themselves, as I said, like, when we started, people didn't even dare to speak to the media. But then from 2012 forward, lots of people are eager to speak, willing to speak, and they're not afraid to speak out about their mind, their wish, their rights. I think that's what all the media like Radio Free Asia, DVB, Minsima, Irrawaddy, all the media that play. I mean, we give a platform for them to speak out. And I think that is pretty important for the democracy to flourish, right? Mm-hmm. People need to speak out, and they don't need to be afraid of getting arrested for what they're saying, that they are right. And then I think we can see these changes. And then when the NLD government came in 2016, and people still dared to speak out against Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD government too. It's not just about the military dictatorship, but it's also about the democratic government. That doesn't mean that we cannot criticize them when they're doing wrong. And I think that's what all our media play in that role. And it's not just people in Yangon. It's not just people who are intellectual or educated, but it's all layer of different people, like poor people, working class people, people who are in the business. We gave them all these platforms, and the program that we create, like the two programs we have created, one is DVB Debate, which is the idea is, we don't have a debate culture in Burma. We didn't have it. And we thought, like, it could be better to debate than talk instead of fighting each other, killing each other. And that's one of the main idea that we have created. And then another one is we call Dobye Dobye. It's our country, our land. We want to reconnect people from the cities, people from the town to remote area, remote township, and they can express all their wishes and all their rights, all their proud about their own community, their own language. So that's a two program. I mean, apart from all the news program we've been doing. So I think it's yes, the free media, the independent media have played a pretty big role in the last 10 years. And I think probably that's what we see now with the young generation, not accepting at all with this kind of military coup and oppression.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, I was there for this so-called golden age where things opened up. It was remarkable, just the proliferation of different media outlets and the embrace of it. And the problem was the business model. Many outlets can arise, but the ability to sustain them was difficult. But the desire to speak, the desire to debate and discuss and to learn and to report and to voice is just so natural, been built up for so long, for decades, and it just bursts forward that it's very difficult to put back in the bottle, no doubt. I want to come back to that in a moment. Let me turn to Karin here. I mean, as Chan Naing suggested, there's a whole constellation of activists and CSOs working in press freedom and media development in Myanmar. And I know you have experience with them, and many of these are not just as suggested in Myanmar language, in Burma language, but in local ethnic languages or local media that evolved. I'd be interested to hear your experience with these other media that emerged, not just national, but local, and the other activists and CSOs working in the freedom of expression space.
Yeah, no, and thank you, Derek, and thank you for, RFA for organizing this panel. It's really an honor to take part in this alongside such inspiring voices from Myanmar who have been working in this field for so many years. I just wanted to jump on your point just about sort of the growth of the media sector and some of the constraints, because I also have been struck by just the amazing sort of growth and development in the media sector over the last decade, both at the national and regional level, and particularly with the growth of ethnic media outlets. And I agree with the other speakers that these outlets really have played a key role in news coverage both before and after the coup, and it's just been a complete flowering in terms of the diversity and the number of outlets and the types of issues they cover. But we were seeing even before that, despite this sort of growth in the numbers and what on the face of it was a very diverse media sector, this has been an issue for years, where they have faced a very uneven playing field in terms of the economic sustainability factor. And we've really seen that, studies by the Media Development Investment Fund and others have noted sort of ongoing challenges, particularly for the small outlets, and particularly in the ethnic states, in becoming and staying commercially viable. And this is in an environment where, the state media were receiving subsidies and considerable advertising revenue from both governments in power. So that, I think, was an ongoing issue. And I think for the media outlets that are now there, many of which have had to shift into sort of offshore exiled modes of operation since February, I think that's a continuing huge challenge, just in terms of figuring out how to remain economically viable in a very, very difficult operating environment right now. But going a little bit off the media sector and looking at sort of the broader range of CSOs and activists, which I've been involved in, I would say that the growth in the media sector has also been sort of mirrored or accompanied by the growth in the CSO and activist sector over the last decade. And that's also been a really, promising and positive development. We've seen both sort of national level organizations, as well as a number of CSOs in different states and regions, which really have, jumped onto, free expression advocacy, press freedom issues, media development issues, and including journalism training, and also training for activists in how to sort of document and report on violations. And what we've seen is, these groups are focusing both on, I would say, sort of documenting the violations, and that could be looking at the way legal charges are used against journalists, physical attacks, and then also sort of pressing for reform of repressive laws. And these laws for sure have been wielded both by the military government and the civilian government over the last 2 terms with the NLD. One of the major sort of positive movements I saw was around Section 6060 of the telecommunications law, which was being used to charge dozens of activists and journalists as well. And, they didn't, it wasn't completely successful, but I think it did raise awareness of the issues among a broader sector of the population. And it did sort of push back against the use of this law slightly. We've also seen sort of similar movements against the criminal defamation laws and the Official Secrets Act, which was used to charge the Reuters journalists Wallon and Chasa'u a few years ago, who we gave an award to and have received numerous awards for their work by a number of different organizations. In terms of PEN Myanmar, for example, that was a group of writers that was founded in 2013 after the opening, and really has focused mostly on developing writers and literature in a range of Burma's languages, and running sort of workshops to encourage creative expression by people who have long had to self-censor, and this is at the very grassroots levels, and then also sort of engaging and educating new government MPs and policymakers. And then as well, there's been a little bit of work on sort of advocacy in terms of pushing for positive laws, such as the passage of a right to information law, and also, again, with other groups calling for the repeal of many of these very repressive colonial era laws and for broader reform of the media sector. So that's what a lot of these groups were working on up until February. And I'll stop there maybe, and then I can talk a little bit later about just how things have changed since.
Yeah.
But that's sort of an overview. But I would say the growth of this sort of I would say the larger ecosystem supporting media freedom and free expression has mirrored the growth of the media and was a very, very positive change in Myanmar over the last decade.
Yeah, and again, I saw that personally. Whenever I would travel to different regions of the country, I would make sure to meet with the local media. Chin media or Kachin media, wherever they were. There's usually 2 people or so, in a small room who were passionate about just reporting. And the Kachin media, they broke all kinds of stories up there. They were quite remarkable. And they're still there. And it's very important that local languages that media are supported everywhere, given very local conditions. Let me get to that issue you mentioned, Karin, about where we are today. Clearly, we're in a people will say back to the future, and it looks very much like the pre-2011, 2012 period. And I just like to ask each of you, start with our Myanmar journalists, how you're adjusting your work to account for this closing space in the country now. Is it simply reversion back to where it was pre-2011, pre-2012, or is it somehow different now? I ask Aye Aye Mon maybe to start.
Yes, the current situation already reversed to pre-2012 period, already gone back, because after a military coup, the military council shut down 7 private media, including DBB and Myanmar, and they arrested nearly 100 journalists within 8 months. Some were released now, but over 50 journalists in the country still in prison and detention centers. Some journalists even don't have contacts with their family members. We don't even know how many journalists fled from the country, how many journalists are in hiding because of fear, how many journalists lost their jobs because of military coup. And the police and soldier also killed 3 poets from Maung Sagai division who criticized the military coup and the army with their poems. They killed them in mass demonstration. They killed them in interrogative center. So I think it is a severe oppression, brutality against freedom of expression. So the current situation even worse than pre-2012 situation, I think.
Chan Naing, how are you looking to do your work now, and how is it different or not different than where it was before?
I think for us, for DVB, it's a little bit different, maybe compared to Radio Free Asia or the exile media, because maybe we were too optimistic. So we shut down our operation in Oslo in 2013. And then we moved partly to Thailand and partly to Burma. And then in 2017, everybody moved to Burma. And the whole operation is in the country. And all our journalists, reporters, everyone are known among the public, among to the authority. It's no more secret that you are working for Democratic Voice of Burma. So now, after the coup, we had a huge security risk for our reporters, our staff, because they're known to the authority. So we are in the process of I will call it like a retreat, and we have to regroup, and then we have to rebuild, because we had nothing outside of the country. And now we had to come back into exile, and we have to operate from exile, and everything it's gone, right? So we have to redo everything. But with the experience that we have in the past, like almost 2 decades, the working from exile. So for that thing, we don't need to relearn. We know how to handle it, how to connect, how to form the group, how to get information out of the country. I mean, that sort of thing, we are okay. But the way it happened, it's all of a sudden, and it's not because there has been a rumor about the military coup, but I used to say, like, it's not like we don't expect, but it's not like we're stupid that we don't know that there might be a coup. But what we thought is they're not that stupid to see the power.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, everybody lose. I mean, they are stuck now with the whole, resistance, and they're totally stuck. Everybody lost. The whole country lost.
Yes.
Nobody win with this group. Right.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. I didn't mean to cut you off at all, Chan Naing. Can I ask both of you, though? I mean, do you find now, you mentioned, Chan Naing, that in the old days, no one would talk to you in the early 90s and people were afraid, and that changed over time. You've had this period where there's been an opening. People have gotten used to media and their expression. As you suggest, people are not going back. They're just refusing to return to the old days, and because they've experienced this moment where they were able to express and to spread out, in essence. Is it changing the way? I mean, do you have more resources? Do you have more sources? I know RFA is still inside the country reporting, from what I understand. I'd be interested to know how you're addressing this situation differently than maybe in the past, or the conditions might be different, or do you just see it as it's really just like it was 10 years ago in terms of our ability to report, our space to find sources, et cetera? I'm just curious where you see differences and similarities to 10 years ago. And Chan Naing, do you want to have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a huge difference. I mean, big difference. I think one thing, because of the communication, is open up in the last 10 years, and it's really quick. The internet, mobile phone, smartphone, it's really opening up. And I think that's really changed. And social media and internet, it's the way that we connect to the audience has changed. I mean, we may have a satellite TV, but also lots of people are using internet, and even the authority, the military, banned Facebook. We can see our Facebook page follower jump like almost triple after the coup. That's under they ban the Facebook, right? So it's huge difference. And I think the big difference maybe is in 1988, our generation, we haven't really tasted the freedom, right? We were just talking and demanding for human rights and democracy, but we didn't know what it is. But the younger generation now today, they know what the freedom is, and they enjoy the freedom of press, freedom of demonstration, freedom of speaking out what they believe. So that's a total different. And I mean, you can see, like, from 1988 in the military coup in 1988, it took like 3 or 4 days for the military to crack down on the protests of the coup. But now it's 8 months. There's no single day without demonstration in the whole country. It's already 8 months that people are still resisting. And you can see on the social media, you can see on, I mean, you don't really need a statistic, right? That's or research, but you can see, like, quite obviously people are still resisting. And it's with this coup, I think it's the military has no way to rule this country any longer. Maybe that's one of the, out of this, negative thing, that one of the big advantage. I think people kind of decided we no longer want you anymore. Yeah. I think that's what we are now.
Yeah. And Aye Aye Mon, any thoughts about how does RFA operate in the country now? How do you get information in? How are you able to spread? What are the challenges?
We are struggling a lot in this difficult situation. Up 1 month after a military coup, half of RFA journalists fled from the country because of fear. So we are nearly collapsed. Now I am reorganizing, hiring new journalists who are very brave to fight that military regime with media too. But still really difficult because of electricity cut down and internet cut off, and also here and there bombings and killing each other. And so journalists hiding in secret places and at the same time and continue to work for the people. And for that information sources, mostly we use internet because we don't dare to go out for shooting and interviewing people. So we are still in difficult situation in this challenging period. We are still struggling to continue our work inside.
Yes, indeed. Karin, let me ask you. You had mentioned that you wanted to say more about your contacts in the space nowadays since February 1st, and what are your observations from your partners on the ground?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's difficult to talk after everyone else because I may be repeating a little bit of what they've said, but I'm definitely in agreement. And I do agree that the situation is in some ways very similar and in some ways very different than previous periods of military rule. So when you look at sort of the techniques of the crackdown, I would say they're quite similar in terms of the closing media outlets, using the laws against journalists, many people having to shift, both individuals and the whole organizations having to shift back from to operating from exile instead of within the country, or they've moved to the border areas of Burma where there's less military control. And definitely what we've seen is for the advocacy groups, they've really had to shift their target. So instead of advocating with the government, they're having to now, I think, shift the advocacy to looking at international governments, the US, the UK, the EU, looking at the UN, and then also, which has been a big change, but I think ties into this, the big role of companies in the digital environment, doing advocacy with Facebook, doing advocacy with Twitter. So it's not just looking at advocacy with sort of the usual actors anymore, but really engaging very directly with Facebook, with Twitter on certain issues, both in terms of, security, but also in terms of the way Facebook has been used in Myanmar. And definitely, I think, although these techniques are the same, the main difference is for sure the dramatic growth and leapfrogging in digital connectivity. And it's really, I would say, impossible for Burma to be as closed off or the media environment to be as censored as it was during previous periods of military rule. With millions of people connected via cell phones, and we have this younger generation that's really quite digitally savvy. They use social media, they use encrypted apps, they use circumvention tools. It's very difficult to sort of close things off. And I agree with Chan Naing that this younger generation has really come of age and started their professional careers in an environment of complete freedom, and it's basically impossible, I think. I mean, I'm hoping to put that genie back into the bottle completely. I mean, it's just, I think, a very different situation than 10 years ago, and there is this sort of generational shift, I think, with the newer generation, and you see it. They are playing a key role in pushing back against military rule and in coming up with, I would say, very creative and inventive ways to show their disapproval and to push back. I would say, though, that the sort of digital connectivity, it presents challenges as well as these great opportunities. I mean, we've seen with the frequency of blanket internet and telecom shutdowns that can have dramatic negative impacts on the ability of journalists to do their jobs, but also citizens to be able to share and receive information. So if you pull the plug on the internet, like people are going to be in darkness. There's very little that can do. Fortunately, I think there's enough pushback, and large sections of the economy really also rely on those digital tools. So I think that is an impossible thing to do on a countrywide level for maybe longer than what we saw in the spring. And then the other thing I'd say is that surveillance is for sure a concern, and there's an ongoing need to train larger swaths of the population, and particularly I would say the older generations, in basic digital security techniques and tools to keep themselves safe if they are going to be online, because it can put people at risk as well as presenting an opportunity to get the news out or to get information. But yes, generally I'm in complete agreement with the other panelists, about what's the same and what's different, and hopefully provides this area for hope and optimism.
Yeah, no, that's very important, that angle you bring to this. And it's true, the young generation bring a whole new level to this discussion, and you see it throughout Asia. The Milk Tea Alliance, the so-called Milk Tea Alliance of young people in Thailand and in Hong Kong connected to young people in Taiwan or elsewhere, finding ways to both use the internet, use the digital space to express themselves, as well as avoid the negative aspects of the digital space of surveillance. So it's remarkably creative, and it crosses borders. It really is inspiring for anybody who's watching it. I know Radio Free Asia is looking a lot at how to use digital to get into countries and to breach some of these firewalls, so to bring light again in the midst of a lot of surveillance and dark uses of the web. Let me ask a little more sensitive question, a harder question, because if you would have had this conversation a year ago, the conversation would have been about the Rohingya, which dominated the conversation about Myanmar in recent years for good reason, because of the genocide, of crimes against humanity, whatever you want to call it, against that population. That created some sensitivities and issues for media inside the country after 2017, from my observation. I'd like to ask that question of just how complicated was that to report inside the country on an issue that at that time, maybe it's changed a bit now, somewhat now, maybe not completely, but certainly in those days, people were on the side of the military. There was this big nationalist move, and the media had to report in an environment where truth or sunlight wasn't necessarily welcome. And it may have run against people's attitudes. I'd be very interested to ask both of you, Aye Mon and Chan Naing, your perspective on how you reported on the Rohingya and what lessons you learned from that. So maybe Aye Mon, can you?
Yes. Rohingya issue is one of the most sensitive issues for all journalists in Burma. But RFA has been trying to cover about Rohingya people since 2012 as much as we can. But because of local people sensitivities, because of the government's unwillingness, both NLD and USDP governments' unwillingness, and also because of the aggressive attitude, the army aggressive attitude to Rohingya people, almost all inside media had to control, had to do self-censorship when they cover about Rohingya issue. And even Aung San Suu Kyi, the country leader and the Nobel Peace Laureate, she has to avoid by using the name of Rohingya whenever she speaks about them because of local ethnic people sensitivity. So almost all inside media already given up by covering about Rohingya issue, but RFA never stop using the name of Rohingya and never stop covering about Rohingya issue. But DBV in 2017, the whole DBV headquarters based inside the country. So DBV has own experience to do with self-censorship, right, Koijan? So you can tell about it after 2017, because the DBV at that time could partner with the state media, the MRTV. So your channel broadcast from the MRTV line. So you have to control about reporting Rohingya issue because of authority restriction, right? You know more than about me.
Yeah. Can I come in?
Please, yes, please do.
No, I mean, what I'm referring is, we rebroadcast Voice of America and Radio Free Asia as well, I think on our TV. And we do use Rohingya, but then we say sometimes like the military don't recognize, or the government don't recognize the name of the Rohingya. So we have a sort of a disclaimer, but Radio Free Asia didn't have it. So they were pushing us to tell Radio Free Asia not to use the word or put a disclaimer. So that was the situation. But back to the whole Rohingya issue, it was really difficult and delicate. But we did organize, like, for example, one debate about the Rohingya, and we invited, in fact, the chief minister at the time from Arakan State under U Thein Sein government, Nathan Maung. He's now in the military cabinet.
Yes.
He came. In fact, he was an active chief minister. He came, and then our host, the moderator, that debate show was like 200 people came on the public. It's the biggest amount of people who came up, and both from the Rohingya side and both from this Buddhist groups. And our moderator at the beginning, he said, how should I call it? Should I use Rohingya or should I use Bengali? And it didn't work. It took like 30 minutes discussing what language we could use. And then there's one UN guy who was at the debate show. He said, if you keep talking about the name, you were never able to do a debate. You just have to say Muslim minority or something like that. So the point is, if we want to raise the issue, then we have to go deeper into how we can raise it instead of sticking like Burma or Myanmar, for example. Right? The name is always a big issue. And we did get lots of threat, in fact, from the Buddhist extremist group, calling us on the phone, writing on the Facebook, bullying, like cyberbullying. We had lots of these things. It's not only with the Rohingya, but also with Muslim minority in other area. In Meitila, for example, there was a terrible killing of Muslim in Meitila. Whenever we reported that sort of stories, we got lots of angry messages from the extremists, and that's one thing. The main difference is, like, in the past we know who is our enemy, like the military, right? And they have a uniform. But after 2012, you don't know who your enemy is because they could be in the public, right? This extremist group, they don't have a color, they don't have a uniform. So it's a pretty tough, and maybe, I don't know, with this uprising and out of all this tragedy, I think one good thing come up is people probably understand more about minority right, religious minority right, the Rohingya rights, that we all equal. Nobody is above the law, regardless of your ethnicity, your religions, your background. And I think people will understand more about the reality and equality.
I think that's right, Chan. I saw firsthand the violent attitudes on this issue, over the name, over the issue. It was deep-seated, and after 2017, it broke into the public consciousness in a very violent way. But I appreciate both of you being very candid about that situation in the context. Karin, I'm sure you've had some interactions with colleagues, maybe some awkward interactions with partners. I'm curious your perspective on this during that period, or up to today even.
Yeah, no, again, I'm probably going to echo what some of the other panelists have already said. But definitely I would say that, what we saw in the media environment and the, self-censorship and the different ways of using the name or not using the name and using alternate names. That happened among, I would say, the activist community as well, where we, not among all activists for sure, but we would, some colleagues and people that we would work with who, they're technically human rights activists, you would think they would be supportive of, speaking out about a crackdown on a minority like this. They didn't really want to touch the issue. They wouldn't use the word. If we were using the word in, let's say, a press statement that we were putting out, they didn't want to sign on to it if we were using the word in the press statement or report. So I would say that these sensitivities were reflected in the human rights activist community as well. And I agree that they reflect a fairly deep and widespread sentiment on the issue. And so it's hard. And the military for sure was tapping into those sentiments, but it's not something they created. It's something that's, I think, present among pretty large, swaths of the Burma Buddhist ethnic majority population. I do think that now post-coup, again, echoing other panelists, I think that there has been, an increasing level of maybe rethinking or greater level of sympathy with the Rohingya and with other ethnic minorities, and the realization that people have to all work together in order to push back against the military. And I think there has been some level of just sort of rethinking what was going on 4 years ago, and trying to do things differently this time, and really working in coalition with a wider range of ethnic groups as well. So I do feel like, again, it's a bit of a silver lining with the coup, but I do feel like there has been some rethinking on this issue by the broader, Myanmar population, which has been a positive after effect as well.
Yeah, an awakening, as it were. And I think Americans recognize what an awakening looks like, when suddenly there's an event where suddenly people awaken to the racial injustice, the religious, and whatever injustice has been going on systemically, that sometimes you need a wake-up call. And I hate to say there's anything out of this coup that's positive, but if there's going to be peace and reconciliation and stability and prosperity and all the rest and development in the country, there has to be some unity of effort and some empathy for each other across ethnicities. So one hopes that is emerging from this moment of anti-coup activity. We have just a couple minutes. Let me just ask one final question to all of you, maybe 1 minute each tops, which is, what's your advice to those of us in the international community, how we can assist, those of us who want to assist what's going on there, and particularly when it comes to media or free expression? What advice would you give those of us watching and those of us who are eager and passionate to help? Aye Aye Mon?
Yes. I would like to ask international community, including UN, the United States government, and EU governments, to support us more and more, because without your help, Burmese people cannot save the country again. We journalists are also struggling too much to continue our work. Now, at that moment, over 1,000 people already killed, nearly 7,000 people arrested, over 50 journalists in prison now. So Burmese people, including journalists, need your help to save the country and to get back media development. Again, we lost it. We need your help. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think, in the past decades, lots of donors and governments talking about, when it comes to the media, for how to sustain the media, independent media in the country, try to, commercialize in that part. But I think it's pretty much premature. We have been talking to our donors and other governments, there is no level playing field when it comes to the independent media compared to other media tycoons that existed with the military many years in the past. And of course, DVB and Radio Free Asia, we're still quite big compared to other small ethnic media groups. It's no way you can sustain them commercially without the support from the different donors in international countries. I think that will take some time to be able to materialize And especially now, of course, we need more than any time before the international assistance on that regard to keep the independent media. And not just in Burma, of course, you can see everywhere, even in the Western world, all the media is struggling while all this fake news coming up. So I think it's not just in Burma, but in the whole international community. I think the independent media survivor is really, really important, and we need help more than any time before.
Thank you, Karin.
Yeah, no, I would just completely echo that. I mean, for sure, I think there's a need for everybody to advocate for continued and flexible funding, both for individual journalists who need assistance to keep going, as well as for the media outlets as a whole, who, many of them are operating from exile and have no means of commercial viability at the moment. And definitely, I think a need to continue, advocating for, continued attention by policymakers to violations of media freedom, for calling the release of jailed journalists, both the Burmese journalists and also American journalists like Danny Fenster, and sort of pushing the military government on media freedom. And just to say, like, there is this sort of entire generation of outlets and of professionals, in the media sphere, but also in the sort of human rights and civil society sphere, that have been built up and have been developing their skills over the last decade. And I think, to continue to support them and to enable their resilience during this period is crucially important.
Well, thank you so much, Karin, for that. And I just want to thank all of you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your commitment. All of you are shining a light in and on Myanmar that is unparalleled. And really the courage in doing so is inspiring. And I just want to say we must not let Myanmar fall back into darkness, both inside, but also in the international community with everything else going on in the world, Afghanistan and the rest. We must continue to remember Myanmar and not give up on supporting this long suffering and struggling people there. Aye Aye Mon, Chan Naing, Karin Karlekar, thank you so much. Thank you everyone at RFA. Congratulations, happy 25th anniversary to you. I want to say to everyone watching, don't go away. There's going to be a break for maybe 20 seconds. And then afterwards, Bei Fong will be back with her taped interview with Nathan Maung. And as you heard earlier, some comments, some statements from some members of Congress. So thank you all very much. And we'll see you in a few seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks to everyone. What a great, thought-provoking and insightful conversation. Thank you again to Derek and to all our panelists for their insight. So I recently had the chance to speak with Nathan Maung, a pioneering Burmese journalist who was instrumental in helping RFA set up its in-country operations in 2012. Nathan's story is a compelling one, especially given the ordeals he underwent this year, which we discussed. But I couldn't help but note his optimism, despite immense challenges and setbacks, both for himself and for the country, which carried through in our conversation. Please have a listen.
In March this year, Burma's military junta raided the offices of Commemorated Media, an independent news outlet that was co-founded by pioneering Burmese journalist Nathan Maung in 2012. Nathan was detained along with a producer. Both suffered harsh treatment and abuse while being interrogated and held. After 98 days, Nathan, who holds dual U.S. citizenship, was released from jail and deported to the United States, where he lives today in exile. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story. I wanted to begin by taking you back and asking you a little about what was happening in Burma when you started Commemorated Media back in 2012. I know you worked closely with RFA and our Yangon bureau back then.
Thank you, Bei. It is a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me. And also, it was, excited, time back in the 2012. So I was working for the Radio Free Asia Burmese service and started a new television program. So I was the producer and, content provider. So I began, working in Rangoon office. So, providing the footages and stories for the back to the Washington, D.C. At the time, country has been having the by-election, and the Democratic leader Aung San Suu Kyi won, overwhelmingly inside the country. So after that, everyone in Burma excited, and the new media outlets are printing more and more and coming out the new daily newspaper. So at the time for the media, it was so excited time.
It really sounds like that. And what made you decide to become a journalist in the first place? You came to the U.S. in the 1990s and then returned to Myanmar in order to become a journalist, correct?
Yeah, it is. I love writing. Of course, since I was, in the high school. So I fled for Thai-Burma border, in early 1999. So I became a refugee and resettled back to the North Carolina at the time. So I went to school in media studies and film production. So I started to working for the Radio Free Asia Burmese service as a weekly contributor. And I was thinking that I want to go back to make a visit back to maybe a little bit closer to Burma at the time. I choose in Thailand.
And what do you remember from that time and working with RFA in those early days?
Oh, it was like back in 10 years ago. I was so excited working with the chief, department chief Andy Naing, and other editors. They give me a beautiful assignment about my travelogue and my film critic, about the Burmese international film. At the time, I was exploring about movie and news and traveling experiences. So I was, I've been away from Burma for like 15 years at the time. So I guess I miss my homeland very much.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry. I don't want you to have to relive that traumatizing experience from earlier this year. But after the coup, when you were arrested, can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, in the wake of the military coup, me and other journalists and other people inside the country didn't expect that would happen. We didn't think it would happen, also that we didn't prepare it. So just only within a 24 hour, me and my producer and then make a crucial decision that we're gonna keep telling story to fight against the military coup and the military dictatorship, because we decided that we have to promote the independent human rights journalism. So we have to highlight the any physical violence and also the cultural and structural violence that that is committed by the military junta for many decades.
So you didn't expect the military to actually crack down on press freedom at the time that it happened?
We are seeing hundreds of thousands and millions of people are coming out to the streets and protest against the regime, and we knew that it's going to come to the media to be cracked down at the time. We didn't have time to move around and to face the brutal crackdown. In the broad daylight, there are about 45 soldiers showed up at our office and raided and destroying everything. So me and Handa was sitting in the newsroom. So we decided to stay and waiting for their come out. So we knew that, we prepared that we're gonna get killed and they're gonna shoot us any minute. So we just keep praying. So 5 minutes later, they broke our newsroom door and pointed the gun to our head and tried to shoot. I said, no, please don't shoot us. So they put a blindfold to our face and to our head, and they handcuffed in the back and sent to the notorious AGI interrogation center in northern Rangoon.
And can you tell me a little about what happened there? And over that time that you were there, what was it? What were you thinking about? What were you holding on to something that kept you hopeful?
I It is very, difficult to describe the feeling and the thinking at the time, but my gut told me that it's gonna be the hell. So I got to be prepared for the wars. So during the 15 days at the military, the interrogation center, for first 8 days, so they torture me and my producer Han Danye for non-stop without sleeping for, I guess, 4 days. Because we were in the blindfold all the time, so we cannot see the day and night and how many people are interrogating us. So it's every 2 hours they're rotating and torture us. They beat me, my face, my cheekbone, and my eardrum every 2 hours. Whatever I say, about my journalism and my reporting and my personal life, I got beat,
What about your colleague who was arrested along with you? Is he or other Kamayut journalists still in jail?
Me and Handa were, arrested and sent to the insane prison. And we didn't know that, there will be another, Kamayut journalists were arrested and, they put in the prison for, we don't know exactly. So I just, got released and deported in June 14. And 3-4 days later, I just got learned that the 3 more journalists, were arrested in April, and they are also in the inside. So I haven't had a chance to contact with, them and their family. So, but I'm trying my best to get in touch with them to look after them, their well-being, and they got food. Make sure they got food, and they got everything they needed, medicine or everything. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. So what would you say is the state of independent journalism in Yangon today, or in Myanmar today? I know RFA journalists on the ground in Myanmar have to rely increasingly on citizen journalists and social media posts, as we do in closed countries like China and Vietnam. How do reporters actually function there now, in your knowledge?
As you look at the example of our media office is raided and destroyed everything. They took all the equipment, everything, and also our journalists who we are working from the different the cities and towns. The totally our operation was totally stopped. So as we are seeing the current situation close up, so there are numerous evidence that the existence of the independent media is total wipeout, along with the civil society. So because of the military, it seems the democratic institutions are the biggest threat to their rule, such as journalism and the civil society. So, whatever, if they are seeing suspect, if you are taking a picture with your phone or taking a video with your phone, even you are a citizen journalist or not, we don't know what to say. You can get killed and you can be arrested any minute, any time now. So Burma became a very dangerous place for the journalists and for the ordinary citizen to live.
So what can be done now to support journalists and groups like Kamayut in Myanmar beyond just spotlighting their predicament and challenges? What can the world do to help?
Yeah, what we can help to keep the independent, media alive for Burma is a good, question for right now. Like a Radio Free Asia, as a independent media outside of the country is the essential for the people of Burma, because Burmese people to get a real story. At the time, we also need to promote the media, journalism. I would say human journalism. To promote the human journalism, to highlight the physical violence and structural and cultural violence, to get a whole picture of what is happening inside Burma, and also in long run, so that we need a strategic media federalism for Burma, because the current situation and crisis We don't know, how long it's going to take, but we are sure that in near future, the Burmese people, need the independent media outlet to tell the story. So we are still relying on what we did it 20 years ago or 25 years ago.
Right.
So I wish only the outside media can tell the true story right now.
And many are very pessimistic about the situation in Burma changing for the better. How do you see it, the future of Burma? And do you think you'll ever go back to work as a journalist there?
I do still have a hope. Maybe I'm a, optimist about future. I do have, one day in near future, I could go back to Burma and, work as a journalist and tell stories. I'm seeing the kindness and the determination of the Burmese people. They are very united, first time in the history. In my lifetime, like 45 years, I never seen like this, the people are united in the face of, against the existence of the military rule. So I totally believe that this tyranny will be gone because of the unity of the people, and the people are willing to fight and sacrifice for their life to restore democratic country back on the track.
Thank you so much, Nathan. We at RFA really offer our best wishes to you, and we hope to work with you again one day in Burma.
Thank you so much. I wish the RFA and the Burma for the best.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us today for Burma, Journalism's Power and Peril, on the occasion of RFA's 25th anniversary. Finally, to close out the event, we'll hear messages from two of our eminent supporters on Capitol Hill. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, a tireless champion for RFA and the former co-chair of the Congressional Executive Committee on China, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, an original co-sponsor of the legislation that created RFA.
Hello, I'm Senator Marco Rubio. For 25 years, Radio Free Asia has been broadcasting to countries in Asia that lacked a free press and needed the free flow of information. Since 1996, Radio Free Asia has held authoritarian regimes accountable and served as a model of free press in closed societies. The importance of a free press cannot be overstated, and Radio Free Asia continues to provide this for countless people around the world. Sadly, there are far too many regimes around the globe that restrict and censor media, depriving millions of the ability to access outside information. Fortunately, there is bipartisan agreement in America to protect and promote freedom of the press. The incredible work that you do and continue to do makes sure that oppressed people across Asia know the truth about the Chinese Communist Party, about repression against ethnic and religious minorities across the region, and so much more. So I want to thank you for your work, and I look forward to the good work to come. May God bless you, and may God bless your continued efforts.
Hello. As House Speaker, it is my official honor to congratulate Radio Free Asia on 25 years of outstanding, impactful service. It is also my personal honor. I was immensely proud to be an early champion of RFA and advancing press freedom in Asia and around the world. For a quarter century, RFA has stood as a beacon of truth, delivering essential news to nearly 60 million weekly listeners denied a free press in their home countries. Today, communities across Asia and around the world sadly confront the rising threats of disinformation, authoritarian crackdowns on the free press, and human rights abuses, all amid an ongoing pandemic. In the face of these challenges, Radio Free Asia's work to broadcast a message of hope and truth is more important than ever, earning RFA the respect and gratitude of the Congress and all freedom-loving people. To Radio Free Asia team, thank you for your important work and best wishes for a wonderful celebration.